Hey guys, it's Timothy here. We are looking at a bunch of conspiracy spoilers today, and I'm not going to go through individually because most of them are going to be reprints, and most of those reprints are from Theros Block, so you may be familiar with a lot of the cards. I'm going to be looking specifically at new cards, cards that have been printed for the first time, or cards that I think need some sort of explanation as far as being printed in a multiplayer set goes. So, couple things to note here. It seems like a bunch of cards were leaked online, unintentionally. Intentionally leaked, but not intentionally spoiled. So a lot of these, you could tell they were taken with someone's personal camera and posted online, and so on and so forth, which makes it awkward for me because normally I'd talk about individual cards, but we're talking about like 120, 130 plus cards that were all thrown online between Friday and today. So I'm not going to talk about all of them. It's too much, but which kind of sucks. I prefer spoilers to leaks, but they're all there. We're still missing about 10 or 11 cards from the set, but we have almost a full idea of what we're getting here, minus probably some conspiracies and stuff like that. So we're going to jump in again. I'm not going to talk individually about cards. Oh, and another thing to note here is whoever's posting these, and you'll see them pretty quickly, whoever's posting these, obviously we haven't gotten an official spoiler of a lot of these cards. So cards that are reprinted from older sets, the actual card you'll see here is very likely going to be the original printing of that card. So for instance, we'll see Psychosis Crawler, and that was printed in Mirrored and Besieged. So they posted the actual picture of the Mirrored and Besieged card rather than the conspiracy version. So any of these cards that are getting altered art, or maybe they have rules changes in the Oracle text or something like that, you won't actually see that unless it's the conspiracy printing. So I'll try to point that out if I can whenever it's relevant, but they're not official spoilers. Just keep that in mind. I don't know when we're getting the official full spoiler, but probably by midweek next week, I would imagine, since the set drops next Friday. Anyway, starting off with 3 mythics here all in a row. Avatar of Woe, Platinum Angel, Show and Tell. They're all perfectly playable. Platinum Angel is a card that people super overrate, but it is good. Avatar of Woe is a card that people rate highly for a good reason, because it's great. And Show and Tell, obviously you're in that one for the price tag here. It's a lot. It's been printed once, and then also printed, I believe, as a Judge promo. This is the Judge promo art, so first time it'll be available to the masses, and it is going to have a pretty hefty price tag. Only thing I'll say about Show and Tell here is that you have to be careful with this card when you're playing a multiplayer match, or limited in general. Even in just a 1v1 game, a card like this can backfire. So if you've ever played Magic the Gathering Cube online or something like that, you may have experience with cards like Show and Tell or Eureka, where people just get to blindly put a card onto the battlefield, and it all happens simultaneously. Your opponents may just have some huge bomb that they can trump yours with, and it's not necessarily something you want to run into. Doesn't make the card bad, but it is something you got to watch out for. So for new spoilers, I will go ahead and talk about them individually. Grenzo's Ruffians is 2 and double red for a 2/2 uncommon goblin with melee. So it gets +1/+1 for each opponent you attack in a given combat phase. When it deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to each other opponent. So it's kind of like a mini Hydra Omnivore, or whatever that card's name is, from the last conspiracy. And it's a pretty sweet card. So it's attacking as a 3/3 minimum, since you will be attacking at least one opponent if you're attacking with this at all. And assuming you're sending some creatures other ways, it's very likely going to be like a 4-mana 4/4, or potentially a 5/5 at its max when it attacks, which isn't bad. So this can deal, if this deals combat damage, you're going to roughly deal around 3 to 5 damage to each opponent on board, which is really, really good. So if you're trying to be aggressive, you're trying to close out a game, this is the type of card you're looking for to fill that spot, and it's really good. It doesn't block well as a 4-mana 2/2, but it does attack pretty well. Gang of Devils, nothing exciting. Hurly Burly, card I'd never even heard of before, from Lorwyn. Selvalla's Stampede. This one is really, really cool, and I think this will fit into a lot of actual EDH decks. Selvala Stampede is 4 double green for a rare sorcery with Council's Dilemma. So starting with you, everybody votes wild or free. For everybody who votes wild, you get to flip over cards on the top of your library until you hit a creature and put all of the creatures revealed that way onto the battlefield. And then for everybody who votes free, you get to put a permanent from your hand onto the battlefield. So obviously, this is just crazy at its maximum value. Assuming there's like a 2-2 split of free and wild, and remember, you get to choose one of those votes. This could be something like put 2 permanents from your hand on the battlefield and then, polymorph twice, or flip over cards until you hit 2 creatures. So that's 4 creatures for a single card. A couple things you need to note about this, because it is going to give your opponent some choices as far as what you get. If you have an empty hand when you cast this, or you have maybe 1 card or 2 cards, your opponents are just going to vote for you to put a card from your hand onto the battlefield. So you need to actually cast this when you have a pretty stocked hand. Otherwise, you're not going to get the value you want off of it. So think about what is in your hand and how many cards you have in hand when you cast this. Think about what your opponents are going to do to make this worse for you. Also keep in mind, this doesn't have to put creatures from your hand onto the battlefield. It says any permanent, so you can stick some extra lands or some enchantments, or I don't know, all sorts of weird stuff. But at maximum value, this is going to get you something like 4 creatures, assuming you have creatures in hand. And that's not necessarily bad at all. Even if they're just blind creatures from the top of your library or something like that, that's 4 creatures for a 6-mana card, which is insane. And assuming you're in green, you probably have the biggest creatures. So very easy way to run the game over, quite literally. But you do need to make sure you don't cast it at a time where your opponents can actually make it really, really bad for you. Psychosis Crawler, like I mentioned, not bad. Kind of unexciting first pick, but it is a way to win the game without ever having to attack. It's whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses a life, so it goes really nicely with draw spells. Echo and Boon, and you can see the obvious leak here, but this is an uncommon conspiracy with hidden agenda. Essentially, whenever you play an instant or sorcery that targets the named creature, you get to copy that spell, and you can choose new targets for it. So you do have to control the creature as well, so it doesn't work if your opponent happens to have it. Notice that the hidden agenda here is working for the creature you name, not the instant or sorcery you cast. So make sure you name an actual creature. I don't think this is too exciting. There are a couple cantrip cards, but those cards aren't particularly good in this set. It doesn't work with removal spells unless you're trying to kill your own creature, so I don't recommend that either. I don't really know. When I look at the full spoiler altogether, when I'm actually, piecing together what works with what and what's the best way to go about drafting it, I may see some cards where this really stands out, but as is, I don't think this is particularly exciting. I don't think it's actually even that good, but it is the type of thing where if you have even like 1 instant or sorcery in your deck that can target a creature of yours, and you're just going to play it anyway, name a creature, and hope it works out. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But I wouldn't go taking this highly. Again, if you see something that it works with extremely well, then go for it. 100-handed one can block up to 100 creatures when it's monstrous. When it is monstrous, which doubtfully will probably not happen in a conspiracy draft. But think about this as a watcher in the web that's actually just like really bonkers good instead of just a good card. It is worth first picking. Fiery Fall and all of that cycle. I think the whole cycle's in this set. The basic land cycling on spells set, or whatever they call that cycle. But I think all 5 of them are in there. Absorb Viz, Traumatic Visions, this Sylvan Bounty, and what's the white one? I don't know what the white one is off the top of my head, but it's in there. Pyretic Hunter, pretty cool card here. This is 4 and a red for an uncommon 0/0 elemental cat. When you draft it, you know how many cards you drafted during that pack, including the Pyretic Hunter. It has Menace, and it enters the battlefield with X counters, where X is the number of cards you noted when you drafted this card. If you draft multiples, it always takes the highest number that you noted. So if you draft one of these third pick, it's going to come in as a 3/3, or come in with 3 counters, I should say. But if you picked another one during the draft at like 6th pick, then all of your Pyretic Hunters will use 6 instead of 3. This is interesting. It's very similar to that card Garbage Fire that we saw a couple days ago, because it's a good card, but it's a card that the later you get it, the better it is. Obviously, if you pick this second pick, it's going to come in as a 2/2 menace, which is not really good. But if you manage to pick this up like 4th, 5th pick, it's actually becoming a really good card. I think the floor here is 4th pick. I wouldn't want to pick this 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, but I'd be very happy to pick it from 4th pick onward, and almost snap pick it anytime after that, because it does have menace, and if you play it as a minimum 4th pick, then it's a 5-mana 4/4 menace, which is slightly better than all the 5-mana 4/4s we've already seen in this set. Menace being an evasive ability that can get around those. So I think this is a really interesting card. I like how there's kind of a little dilemma as to, do I pick this card now? Do I pick it later? But I don't know. Stone Shock Giant, Theros reprints everywhere, by the way. Just here because of monstrosity, I guess. I don't know. I feel like some of these could have had like cool new designs, but they reprinted a lot of Theros cards here. Speaking of which, Shipwreck Singer, really cool in multiplayer, can force an attack on a creature, but if that creature can't get through what you have, or if you're threatening that -1/-1, then they're probably going to send it elsewhere. So pretty cool politics card. Excuse me. Public Execution's fine. Sangromancer's pretty good. Sangromancer, and it is worth noting that with Sangromancer, there are some pretty good discard effects in here. So this card has potential to gain you a lot of life throughout the game. Not to mention, it's just a 4-mana 3/3 flyer, which is pretty good on its base. Hamlet back Goliath, or Damn It back Goliath. Every time I see one, it just the biggest vanilla-ist of all the beaters that ever were beaters. This card is like, I have a personal gripe against it, and I don't know why. Like, it's actually a good card. Just gets counters anytime any creature hits the battlefield, and just is gigantic. But I don't know. I just don't like it. Everybody has cards that they just don't like, whether they're good or not, right? Anyway, that's Hamlet back. Alphagard Hound, Hail of Arrows, a card I'd never seen before. I will stop on Fade into Antiquity here, and there's also Disenchant in this set, which is worth mentioning. There is no sideboarding in a multiplayer game. When you're doing Conspiracy Draft and you play, you're one and done, and that's it. So Fade into Antiquity is a card that if you need that sort of effect, if you really think somebody has something worth killing, like a Platinum Angel maybe, then you have to mainboard this card. And then you fall into the line of, well, if I draw it and it's a dead card, that could have been something better. So my advice, even Fade into Antiquity isn't even like good artifact or enchantment removal. The thing I hate about prints like this and Disenchant is that when Wizards is making the set, or the development is making the set, they know that there's no sideboarding, so why not make an actual good artifact or enchantment removal spell? Or why not use, like, at least something like Caustic Caterpillar would have been better, because it's a body, it's never irrelevant, whereas a card like this is going to be irrelevant in a percentage of the games you play. Why not make an actual decent card that's never going to be a blank, but isn't necessarily like top-notch either? I don't know, but I would err on the side of not playing Fade into Antiquity. If you've been playing Eldritch Moondraft at all, and you know the card Ironrite Cleansing, that's the same exact thing in a different color, and that card is virtually unplayable even for its intended purpose. Fade into Antiquity was from Theros, where enchantments mattered, so it was slightly better, but even then it was sideboard. You could mainboard it. Pariah, this is a pretty cool card that people don't seem to like, but I like it. I will stop here. Horn of Greed, I believe, is what this card is called. Yeah. 3 mana for an artifact. Whenever a player plays a land, that player draws a card. I'm going to warn you, do not play this card. In Commander, do whatever you want, but if you're trying to win a 4-person free-for-all game, do not play a card that draws your opponent's extra cards. The exception is if you have some sort of busted a deck where you can play multiple lands per turn and you have the turn 1 Burgeoning every time, then go ahead and play Horn of Greed. But cards like this, from my experience, and this is my opinion, so you can disagree, cards like this suck in Limited because they give your opponent an advantage. You're drawing basically 1 extra card per turn as like a minimum, but for that price, each other opponent is also drawing 1 extra card per turn. So you're distributing 3 more cards across the table while you're only getting 1. Do not play it. Let someone else put it in their deck where it'll benefit you just as much. It's a symmetrical effect. And let them waste their turn to put it on the battlefield, and then you reap the benefits of them playing it. Gruul Warchant. This is a good example of what I was talking about at the beginning. This card from Dragon's Maze was worded, each attacking creature you control gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. I imagine the Conspiracy reprint will say Menace, because that's what that ability is. And Menace wasn't keyworded as a ability until Origins, which was a little bit after Dragon's Maze. So good example of a card here that will probably have some rewording. Otherwise, the card's fine if you're green-red, and it sucks if you're not. Fang of the Pack is a 6 mana, 5 and a green for a 5/3 uncommon wolf. So there you go. Everybody who made Ulrich decks, for whatever sickening reason, you get another card to add to your really bad werewolf transform deck. Sorry, I'm a little shaky too. I'm on my couch, but it has melee. So melee is a tertiary green ability, which I think is pretty neat. It makes sense. And it says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gains melee until end of turn. This is really strong. So 6 mana, 5/3, not impressing anyone. But remember, on its own, when it attacks, it's a 6/4, which again is probably not worth 6 mana. But that other ability to give another creature you control melee means that when you ship out those 2 creatures, the one you gave it is essentially getting at least +2/+2, because you're attacking with Fang of the Pack plus that creature, hopefully on different opponents, possibly up to +3/+3, and the Fang of the Pack is also getting +2/+2 or +3 or whatever. So at its maximum, this thing attacks as an 8/6, which is very strong, and I think if you can send out 2 creatures, this and one other, the one that you're hopefully giving melee, then attacking as a 7/5 makes this guy very, very strong. So I think that's actually a pretty impressive card for green, and I do like seeing melee in green. Keepsake Gorgon, this is probably like first pickable out of a pretty poor pack. Keepsake Gorgon was like nuts in Theros. It was so good, and it's probably just as good here. Nope. I haven't seen any other Gorgon creatures in Conspiracy, so I think you're safe. Keepsake Gorgons do not kill other Keepsake Gorgons, so keep that in mind. But cards easily first pickable out of a pack with like pretty poor rares. Irresistible Prey. I don't see how this card's good, but it is an example of a card that works with the Conspiracy up there somewhere, because it is a cantrip, and the Conspiracy lets you copy this if you cast it on the Hidden Agenda card, so you get to draw an extra card. But this card's pretty bad. Merfolk Sky Scout's fine. Rune Servitor, I'll stop here because I just bashed Horn of Greed. When symmetrical effects are attached to a body, that's a whole different story. So Rune Servitor will often trade for a creature in the early game, which is great for you, but it also draws everybody else a card. So it does have that disadvantage that other people are replacing cards too, or just getting free card advantage, but at least you're probably going to take a creature out with this, or it can block, just chump block. So it's way better than something like Horn of Greed. Deathwind, sure. Carnage Gladiator, worth noting, the first ability here says whenever a creature blocks, that creature's controller loses a life. This includes you if you block with creatures, and it includes people who are attacking each other and blocking, even if you're not involved in the combat. So keep that in mind that it will harm you, and it will harm players who aren't even attacking you. Prey Upon, don't know how good it is in this set. I've actually been unimpressed with this in Eldritch Moon. I no longer think it's the best green common. I don't even think it's like top 2, but it depends on the format, and it'll probably be decent. Juniper Order Ranger, and it's cards from like Ice Age or Cold Snap. What is this? This is Cold Snap, right? It's definitely going to be reworded. It should be an ETB trigger. It's actually pretty strong, so take it if you will. I don't know what rarity this is going to be. It feels like it could be an uncommon, in which case take multiples. It's really, really good, but it's probably going to end up being a rare, I would think. Maybe not. Sphinx of Magosi, we'll stop here because this card is, I'm not going to cuss, but this card is ridiculous if you've ever played against it. It's just like absolute insane for a blue card too. Like, you don't even have to play any other cards for the rest of the game once you stick this. You just draw a billion cards, give it a billion extra counters, and then like everybody's going to take 14 damage. You're going to be sitting with 26 cards in your hand, and everybody's going to just look around and be like, what happened? And you're going to be like, well, I played a Sphinx of Magosi. And they're going to be like, oh, yeah, right, I forgot about that. Card's pretty insane, but it pushes you super far into blue. Moving on to less busted cards. Marchesa's Decree is 3 and a black for an enchantment that says when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, the creature's controller loses a life. This is a very hard card to evaluate because things like it usually trigger on you attacking, but this triggers on you being attacked. So a couple things to note about this. It makes up for that little target you put on your back when you become the monarch, and fits very nicely into black-white decks because they have the best means of maintaining the monarchy. So there is a drawback to anybody who wants to try and steal the crown from you, so to say. The other thing about this can actually just lock someone out from being able to beat you if their life total drops to like 1, 2, 3 or something like that. They just can't attack you anymore. They can't afford to. They'll lose a life for each creature that attacks you, and they probably can't afford to do that at some point. Also, if you're able to block really, really well or swarm the field, this can definitely pad your life total or help it so that your opponent's losing more life, or they're losing more by attacking you than you are by getting attacked. So I feel like some decks are not optimized to play this, but you'll probably play it in a typical black deck, I would think. It's kind of hard to evaluate, but I don't know. Not super exciting, but not bad either. This card has a lot of text on it, but it says 5 mana, draw 3 cards. To give you the actual text, it's a sorcery, it's a rare, it's 4 and a blue. It says you reveal the top 3 cards of your library, you choose an opponent, and that opponent, you choose an opponent, that opponent may give you those 3 cards, or they may put those cards in the graveyard, and then you draw 5 cards. So the idea here is if you just flip over 3 cards that are like all nuts, your opponent might go, okay, well, put those in the graveyard and draw 5 instead. So a couple things to note here as far as the card working is, first off, in Conspiracy 1, milling was a serious problem. In a 4-person game, people tend to wall up and drag the game on, and you could actually just win by being the last person to go through their entire deck. Covenant of Minds has the potential to go through 8 cards on its own by flipping over 3, ditching those, and then drawing 5. And drawing 5 is not bad, but it does lend to the serious problem that if someone's just trying to stall you out and mill you or something like that, it could potentially happen with a card like this. Second thing, I don't see very many conceivable situations where I would rather my opponent draw 5 cards I don't know than have 3 cards that I have perfect information on as far as those 3 cards are concerned. So the way I read this is, unless you're picking a really like awkward player who doesn't understand how card advantage works, then you're probably going to be stuck with those 3 cards. So this equates to 5 mana, draw 3, and you show everybody what cards those are. Also, you can't like hide the information between you and the person you pick. So once they look at those 3 cards, they can share it with the rest of the table. And there's definitely going to be politics going on, and people like, oh no, don't give him this, or oh, give him the 5 instead. We don't like. I don't know. I don't think it's a very good card, and I probably wouldn't even first pick it. Like 5 mana, draw 3 is okay, but at sorcery speed, that's kind of depressing. It's be honest, it's a little Little sad of a card as far as I think it is. I don't know. Maybe I'm misevaluating. Moving on to cards I think are good. Custody Soul Collar is 1 double white for a 1/2 uncommon human cleric with melee. Well, melee, you could just tack it onto anything and it's suddenly good. So this attacks as a 2/3 on its own, which for 3 mana is fine. It says whenever Custody Soul Caller attacks, return target creature card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. X is the number of players you attacked with a creature this combat. So notice that caps out at 3, assuming you're playing 4-person games, and actually caps out even lower if people are already knocked out of the game. But this has the potential to just be really, really good. You can send a lot of creatures in. With the maximum melee boost, this can become a 4/5 attacker, which you only invested 3 mana into this creature. So it curves pretty nicely. You can go 1-drop, 2-drop this guy, and then attack on the following turn. How do you lose that game? Not to mention, this just reanimates small creatures. So if you're playing like this white weenie deck or white-red or something, then this guy is fantastic. You can never get back anything that has converted mana cost 3 or converted mana cost higher than 3, but you don't really need that if you're playing this card effectively. You're going to have those small creatures floating around in your deck, and just being able to reanimate one is pretty good. So it's pretty sick. I do like that this guy works really nicely in multiples. Like, he can get back additional copies of himself. So just draft all of these. It's pretty sick. I think the card is really good. Like, a little mini Sun Titan. That might be pushing it, but you get the idea. Throne of the High City. You always have to have some weird rare land. So this is a rare land. It taps for colorless mana, and it has 4 tap, sack it. You become the monarch. So you're going to draw a card on your end step. And that's all it does. I don't think this is exciting. I do think it's fine. And if I'm in like a solid two-color deck and my mana is not like super shaky and I'm not splashing, I would probably play it in a 2-color deck, leave it out of anything that's really trying to get tricksy with the mana. But the card's just fine. I don't think it's amazing. I don't think it's kind of like sacking a land to draw a card. But it does give you that kind of advantage that you can use it on the end step of the player before you and guarantee that you're going to be the monarch for the turn. Where I do like this card is with a couple of those rares we've seen that say on your upkeep, if you're the monarch, do this. It's harder to be the monarch on your upkeep and guarantee those triggers than it is to be the monarch during an entire turn cycle and make it back to your turn. So there was the big red dragon and that blue guy who makes all your creatures unblockable, but those trigger on your upkeep. So this is a good way to guarantee that you'll be the monarch on your upkeep. And it's really hard to, if you do this on the end step of the person before you, it's really hard for someone to steal that crown before your next turn begins. Unless they can flash in a creature that makes them the monarch or use their own Throne of the High City. But I don't think this card is like something you should be grabbing super quick, first pick. Look at the whole pack, but it is a decent card to start out with and doesn't have any color commitments. Pretty sure Gratuitous Violence is a reprint, but I don't actually know what set. Forgotten Ancient is awesome, just fantastic first pickable. Canal Courier, this is a pretty cool card. Might be a little overpriced, but 5 and a blue for a 3/5 human rogue. It's a common. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. That automatically kind of gives it a little bit of value there. It's essentially you draw a card at minimum. And then it says, whenever Canal Courier and another creature attack different players, Canal Courier can't be blocked at this combat. So pretty sweet little ability there. Make three damage unblockable. That makes its toughness kind of irrelevant, aside from being burned out or something like Deathwind has to overextend into it. But this it's hard to evaluate because it is a nice mix of abilities, that whole monarch thing. If this didn't have the monarch thing, like, I would be hesitant on it, but the fact that you're going to probably draw a card and then, get some other cards, pretty nice. But it also incentivizes you to send a team out. It's also blue, a color that doesn't really benefit from attacking a bunch of different players. So it's really, really odd. Maybe if you're playing like blue-white and you have a lot of melee creatures or you really are going wide, this can get in there. But it does leave you a little bit open, especially after you became the Monarch. The last thing you want to do is send your whole team out and leave yourself unguarded. So this is pretty good. I will also mention that this guy is fantastic with the conspiracy that makes your creatures deal damage based on their toughness. So it's hitting 5 unblockable damage instead of 3. There's no way to interact with that. So unblockable 5 damage is a lot. Good in multiples too, but it is a 6 drop, and that's kind of what pushes me away from it. I feel like if this was like a 4 drop and didn't have that Monarch ability or had like lower toughness and was like a 3/3 or something, I would love it. But as is, I think it's probably a little too expensive, but would probably still play one. Palace Jailer. I'm going to gripe about this one a little bit. 2 double white for a 2/2 human soldier, uncommon. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. They should have made a keyword for that, like Monarch. Just put that on cards, because it's on like literally every card, figuratively every card. This is weird here. Okay, so when Palace Jailer enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until an opponent becomes the Monarch. So this sounds good, right? This sounds really good, like Banisher Priest, Fiend Hunter. I'm willing to bet no suggestion. Okay, never mind. But, you know, those creatures that come down, they exile something, and then when they leave, you normally get the card back. This doesn't actually say that, so it's interesting. I believe the way this works is if you play Palace Jailer and you exile a creature and you're the Monarch because Palace Jailer made you the Monarch, and then Palace Jailer leaves the battlefield before another player becomes the Monarch, I don't know if they actually get their creature back or not. They probably do. I think they do. But this doesn't actually seem that good. Because it sounds good because it seems like it gets rid of a creature, but how many cards have this first ability printed on it where the only thing you have to do to become the Monarch is just play a creature that has it across all rarities in all colors? It's so easy to just become the Monarch even outside of attacking that like this ability is going to be irrelevant half the time. Even from the opponent, like the opponent whose creature you exile doesn't even have to be the one to become the Monarch. Some other opponent at some point is going to become the Monarch, and then this is just a 2/2 for 4, like over expensive. The saving grace here is that you do become the Monarch when it enters the battlefield, so it's at least playable, but I think it's pretty bad. I don't know. I think it's pretty bad. That's just my opinion. Alright, Deadly Designs. Moving on from cards I think are bad to cards that are okay. 1 in a black for an uncommon enchantment. For 2 mana, put a plot counter on Deadly Designs. Any player may activate this ability. Okay. Moving on. When there are 5 or more plot counters on Deadly Designs, sacrifice it. If you do, destroy up to 2 target creatures. So this is interesting because if it didn't have that part about putting opponents putting counters on it, like you're probably just going to dump 10 mana into this to kill 2 creatures, and that's a lot of mana over the span of a couple turns. And honestly, a lot of times that's probably how it's going to play out. The thing here is, though, it kind of works against you because it's kind of like a joined forces card where if there's something really dominated in the field, a creature like a Sphinx of Nagosi or that guy who got 2 Sphinx of Nagosi's, like it needs to die right away. So you're going to have to try and introduce politics to the table. You're going to have to try and say, guys, we need to get this off board or we're all dead. Put some counters on this for me. But the reason it works against you a little bit is because there might be a person who just has a clear field. They have nothing to lose. So they could pump mana into this and make you get rid of this or make you use it up, so to speak, before it actually affects them. The nice thing here is that it is up to 2 target creatures, so if you're the only person on board and someone makes you crack it, like nothing's lost except for the enchantment and some mana from your opponent. But I don't know, it's an interesting card. I think it is worth playing because most of the time I think it will pop 2 creatures, and that seems worth it on my just like on a face value. But if you're in a position where this is killing 2 creatures, you're probably the one who put all the mana into it, and that's 10 mana over the span of a couple turns, which is quite a bit. But it is a threat that everybody sees coming, so they can play around it accordingly. And I don't know. I think it's interesting. We'll leave it at that. Followed Footsteps. Beast Within is sweet. Beast Within is the type of card that I would first pick out of a pack with a pretty bad rare and be pretty happy about it. I don't know where this art's from. I don't think it's new art, but it is pretty cool, and I think it's from something else, but I don't actually know what. But yeah, Beast Within is sweet. Disenchant, same thing I said about Fade into Antiquity. Regicide, this is cool. So 1 black for an instant common as you draft, or reveal it as you draft it, and then target player, or target player. So the player to your right chooses a color, then you choose another color, and then the player to your left chooses a color. They all have to be different colors. And then when you play this, you can destroy a creature that is one of the colors that was picked when you drafted this. So it's pretty interesting, and it leads to some kind of like psychology thing. So the person to your right gets to pick the color first, and that means, like, if that person's playing, like, green-white, they're not going to pick green or white. They're going to pick, like, blue, right? And then there's a good chance that you're not in the same color combination as them, so you're going to pick a color other than blue, and also a color that's not one of the colors you're playing, because it's it's more likely that the player to your left and right are in different color combinations from you. So the person to your right picks blue, you might pick white, and then the person to your left is going to do the same thing the person to the right did and pick a color combination that's not part of their color combination that they're trying to draft. So they may pick red, which means that when you sit down and you play your 4-person game, Regicide is very often going to have targets. It's going to kill something for 1 mana, but it may not necessarily be the creature you want to kill. So for instance, if blue, red, and green were all picked, and you play against a blue-white player who drops this huge white bomb, you're not going to be able to target it with Regicide. It won't work because white wasn't picked. But if they play their Sphinx and Negosi and blue was picked, boom, blow it up with Regicide. So pretty interesting. I think it's great. 1 mana to kill anything is outrageous. So it is interesting that there's that little dynamic there as far as, like, it may not actually kill the things you want. Menagerie Liberator is 3 and a green for a 3/2 with trample and melee, so it attacks as a 4/3 minimum, has the potential to get all the way up to a 6/5 for 4 mana. Not much to say about the card. It's pretty vanilla otherwise, but it's pretty strong, and it is a common. It's a human warrior, and it liberates the menageries, so yeah. Moving on. Leovold's Operative. You draft it face up. It's a 3/2 common elf rogue, 4/3 mana, 2 and green. Draft it face up, and then for the rest of the draft, whenever you draft a card, you're allowed to take another card from that pack. So similar to Cogwork Librarian. If you do, you turn the operative face down, so it's not active anymore. And then when you pick up your next booster pack, you pass it without drafting. So you're essentially picking 2 cards out of a pack, but then you are skipping your next pick, so to speak. Pretty nice. So this is really cool for people who are out there trying to draft value. This is like something you really want, and it's something you want early in the draft. You want to pick it as early as possible. Hopefully pack 1, hopefully like mid pack 1, so that when you get to pack 2 or 3, if you open up like a really busted pack with like a foil mythic and a regular mythic and a Daretti, like you just want to pick all the cool things, you can actually pick 2 cards and just skip your next pick. One thing worth keeping in mind here is, first off, it's a playable creature on its own. It's a 3/2 for 3, so you won't be disappointed to draft it. Cogwork Librarian was colorless, so it fits in every deck, but I'd be happy to draft this even if I weren't drafting green, knowing that it could set up my future draft. And second, the Conspiracies and the Draft Matters cards, like this one, are actually additional cards in the pack, similar to Transform creatures from Shadows over Innistrad, so they don't actually take up the rare slot or the mythic, which means you can open a pack that has a mythic Conspiracy plus a rare creature and maybe even a foil rare, and that's when it really benefits you to have something like this in your pool, because you can double pick a rare out of a pack and be really happy with it. I think it's pretty sweet. I'll be drafting quite a few of them. I do value draft. I'm not above it, so it's the type of thing I'm really happy to see. Goblin Racketeer, 3 and a red for a 4/2 common Goblin Rogue. When it attacks, go target creature. Defending player controls. 4/2s for 4 are pretty unexciting. They just trade down so easily, and this one doesn't really make an exception because it doesn't goad it until after it attacks, so it's probably still going to trade. But if you can get that first attack in against a player who might only have one creature and then goad their creature, they have to swing with it, so they're leaving themselves open for another attack. It's not really good. It's going to be hard to get it in there without losing the guy, but it could see some play in a certain deck, and I don't know. I wish there was an equipment that gave it melee or gave things melee, because then I'd be a lot more excited about it. Messenger Jays, 4 and a blue for a 2/1 flying bird at common. Just stop there. Perfectly playable card. 5 mana, 2/1 flyer. Go tell all your friends to play them. But no, don't do that. Council's Dilemma. When it enters the battlefield, you vote Feather or Quill. For each Feather vote, it gets a 1/1 counter. For each Quill vote, you draw a card and then discard a card. So you're not just getting any sort of like card advantage. You're not just drawing a card. A couple things to note about this. First off, it is an ETB trigger, so if it dies in response to its trigger, like someone just uses a removal spell or burn spell on it or pings it, then everybody at the table is going to vote, put a 1/1 counter on it, and then the card just kind of fizzles a little bit. You still get the vote of draw a card, discard a card. Second off, a lot of people, like, this is a hard card to evaluate because it's hard to imagine like scenarios where one vote is higher than the other. A lot of times I just take the middle ground and assume that it's going to be like a 2/2 and like a 2/2 split on the votes, and then it comes in as a 4/3 flyer and you draw 2, discard 2. That's pretty good. Makes your hand a little bit better, and just you get a good flyer. But if everybody at the table votes like draw a card, discard a card, then it's a little less exciting. You just paid 5 mana for something like a 3/2 flyer, and you didn't gain any card advantage. You just kind of improved the quality of your hand. I still don't think it's bad. I think I would play at least one in my blue deck just to kind of see how it works out, but I don't think I'd be super excited to take multiples. Hexplate Golem, big artifact dude, play it if you want. Orchard Elemental, similar to the Jays we just saw, but potential to be much, much more. Wish I had Trample, honestly, but it's a common. It's 6 mana, 5 and a green for a 2/2 elemental. Another ETB trigger. So Council's Dilemma says when it enters the battlefield, everybody votes Sprout or Harvest. It gets 2 1/1 counters for each Sprout vote, or you gain 3 life for each Harvest vote. So on the max and min side, you can gain up to 12 life, or this can be up to a 10/10. Assuming there's some sort of split, this will very likely be a 6/6 where you gain 6 life, and that's pretty solid. 6 mana, 6/6 that gains 6 life is really strong, and honestly, I think people are less worried about life totals here, so it might actually be like a 4/4 that gains you 3 life. And it's interesting because your vote is very likely going to be counters, because it's much, much more likely that everybody who votes put 2 counters on it will mean the vote after it is probably life, because a 10/10 is pretty scary for some players. Not scary for the person who just has, the removal spell. They're going to vote put counters on it, but, if you get some sort of split, I think it's pretty solid. And if you get the maximum either way, gain 12 seems unexciting. Like 6 mana for a 2/2 that gains 12 is actually probably not that good. So, but you probably won't ever vote the life yourself. Gul'daz Spectre, good card. I would be happy first picking this. Sinuous Vermin is a new card. It is 1 and a black for a 2/2 rat horror. Monstrosity for 3 and 2 black. It gets 3 counters off of Monstrosity, so becomes a 5/5, and when it's monstrous, it has menace. So it fits that curve pretty nicely, being a 2 mana 2/2 bear, turning into a 5 mana 5/5 menace. And it's a common. 5 mana 5/5 menace is pretty strong. Don't get blown out in response to activating Monstrosity, but I think this is a solid little pick, and I'd be happy to play 1 or 2 of them. It's the type of card that, since it's common, this might be the type of card that you pick up for your hidden agenda cards, because it is a solid common that is not necessarily bad in multiples. Goblin Tunneler, not excited. Mnemonic Walls here. Play it if you have the instants and sorceries to get back, or if you have the enchantment that makes its toughness essentially its power. Harvesters of Souls, Vaporkin. I will mention about Vaporkin that these little guys, these 2-mana 2/1 flyers, are pretty good in most formats. If you can't see it, it's basically Tattered Haunter, but it can't block, and that is a huge liability when you're playing against 3 players. So I think Vaporkin actually loses a lot of its power in a multiplayer game. So be wary. I'm not saying don't play it, but be wary of the fact that it can't block, and that could be your demise in a multiplayer game. Lace of Moonglove, another bad cantrip. Smuggler Captain. Wait for this one. Okay, so 3 and a black for it to wait for it. All right, are you waiting? You waiting? Good. All right, 3 and a black for a 2/2 uncommon human pirate. Ooh, okay, cool. I got that out of the way. I'm sorry, pirate. Don't get to play with those often. You draft it face up. When you draft any other card, you can note that card and then turn your captain face down. And then when captain enters the battlefield, you get to tutor up the card you named with this, which is really sweet. It does have below average stats. 2/2 for 4 is not really doing very much, but it's drawing you a card, and it's drawing you a good card too, something that you named and hopefully am tutoring up. It's also good in multiples because you can name different cards the more of them you draft, and any one that you play can let you tutor up any of the cards you named with a Smuggler Captain. But I don't think you want too many of these because it is a 4-mana 2/2, but it's pretty sweet. One thing you can do with this is if you draft a bunch of them, every time you draft a Smuggler Captain and then you draft your second one, you can name Smuggler Captain with the first one, turn that one face down, and then draft another Smuggler Captain with that one and turn the second one face down. But it is uncommon, so it's very unlikely that you'll get that many of them. Just something neat. Human Pirate. What in the world? Bush Strider is uncommon for some reason. Twin Bolt, Farbog Flinger, Garrulous Sycophant. I think this card's actually pretty sweet. 2 and a black for a 1/4 common human advisor. Beginning of your end step, if you're the monarch, each opponent loses a life and you gain 1 life. You don't gain multiple life for each opponent losing life, but this is fine. And like I said, black-white is positioned better to maintain being the monarch. It's kind of like the theme of black-white, even though other colors have it too. And it's got a big body. A 4 toughness creature on turn 3 will lock down the early game pretty well against everything but flyers, and which is annoying because those flyers are probably the easiest way to become the monarch. Something I probably should have mentioned for Vaporkin. But this is just a decent card. Stacks really, really well with creatures that just enter the battlefield and make you the monarch. So gradual life gain. I like cards like this. I like cards that have incidental life gain, or cards that can just kind of bleed an opponent out without you having to attack. Borderland Explorer. If this is a reprint, I don't know what set it's from, but it's 1 in a green for a 3/1 Elf Scout at common. When it enters the battlefield, everybody can choose to discard a card. Anybody who discarded a card gets to tutor up a basic land and put it in their hand. So it's not bad. Its stats are okay. 1 toughness creatures are a little bit awkward on a 2-drop, but 3 power is pretty good, so you can send this at the person who hasn't gotten started yet for a little bit of damage, and it just improves your draw. If you really have a card in your hand you don't need that early, or if you're really hurting for a land, or even if you're splashing, this is one of the best ways to do it. Each opponent does get the option to do it, but like I said, symmetrical effects are a lot better when they're attached to a body that can attack and deal damage or trade for other creatures. So not much to say about it. It is one of the only ways to splash colors in this entire set that I've seen and do it effectively, which is worth noting. Crab's incoming. Skittering Crustacean. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 crab, not Eldrazi crab. I've been spoiled with Eldrazi crab. I have like all 2 of them. And unfortunately, crab just looks stupid on a card by itself, but it is the most busted creature type of all time, I promise you. Anyway, this guy's a common. He's a 2/3 monstrosity for 6 in the blue. Gives him 4 counters, and he's hexproof when he's monstrous. So you're turning your 3-mana 2/3 into a 7-mana 6/7 hexproof, which is pretty good. A hexproof creature is extremely hard to interact with, and can definitely hold down the fort for the remainder of the game. It's going to be very hard for your opponents to get through a creature that big without something like Death Touchy or Unblockable, and is a good attacker and blocker. Just kind of shuts down a lot of combat tricks and removal spells. Unnerve, I will say, is probably better against multiple opponents. I don't love Mind Rot effects, but assuming this gets its max value, you're going to strip 6 opposing cards out of the battle and not have to worry about those cards. So Unnerve might be playable. Not saying jam it, not saying don't jam it, just saying give it a chance. So Blood Soul Harpy, Negate. I would main deck Negate. That's better than playing like random disenchant effects. Ill-Tempered Cyclops. Ember Beast sucks. It still sucks. Spectral Grasp is pretty cool, though. This does not suck. No, you heard it here. Spectral Grasp is better than Ember Beast. Guaranteed fact. So 1 in a white for an enchantment aura. At uncommon, the enchanted creature can't attack you or a planeswalker you control, and the enchanted creature can't block creatures you control. So it's a pacifism, but only regarding your creatures and your well-being. So the enchanted creature can still attack other opponents. It can still block other opponents and stuff like that. It just can't interact with your board anymore. So if there is that Sphinx of Magosi or some ridiculous rare on the field that is just beating everybody down, slap this on it and it's not a problem for you anymore. But you can use it to like take out other opponents, because if that creature can't attack you, it's not just going to sit back and not do its job. It's going to kill the other opponents, right? So I think this card's pretty strong. It's essentially a pacifism in a 1 versus 1 game, but it's a pacifism that helps you win the game a little bit. Rogue's Passage, great reprint. This is always a fantastic card for closing games out. Ghostly Prison, fantastic reprint. Manaplasm, I don't know. Seems okay. Sulphurous Blast, pretty strong. Cloaked Siren seems really random. Burnaway is fine. Sylvan Bounty's good. Tormented Voice. Havenghoul Vampire. Strength in Numbers. Flame Slash is good. Neshin Asp, just another big monstrosity guy. Neshin Asp was the bee's knees in Theros. Ravenous Lucrocoda, Child of Night. God's Willin is good. Fleet and Distraction, a little bit on the weak side, but it is a cantrip. Copperhorn Scout was also in the first Conspiracy. Not sure why it keeps getting reprinted. I don't think it's that good. Caller of Gales. Netcaster Spider's great. Storm Chaser Chimera is just like the most random card in the world. Traumatic Visions is good. Spirit of the Hearth, probably not a card that I'd be super excited to open, but it is decent. Zealous Strike. Whoops. Absorb Viz. So I think this whole basic land cycle is in there. Kite Sail, Wild Griffin. Just this is the type of card that you easily name with Hidden Agenda, because it's easy to get multiples of it. Fester Gloom of your black. Gutter Snipe if you're playing spells. Doom Traveler, because Doom Traveler. Reviving Dose. Do not play this card. This card sucks real bad. Don't play it. Diabolic Tutor. I would err on the side of not playing a tutor this expensive, but do what you want. Lay of the Land is good for searching up basics. Plummet is another category of card that's really awkward, but it's very, very likely that out of 3 opponents, there's going to be a flyer to kill at some point. So Plummet is an arguable main deck card that gets a lot worse and is sometimes just a complete blank in certain matchups. Deceiver Exarch at uncommon here. I don't know what the original rarity on that card is, and there's not really any way to go off with it, but it's just a good value creature, good tempo creature, so to speak. Bonds of Quicksilver is fine. Ogre Sentry, just a big defender, hold down the fort for a little while. This card is actually quite strong. 2 creatures you control each get +2/+2 and gain flying until end of turn for 4 mana. It is a sorcery. You do have to have 2 creatures. You have to control both those creatures. So there are a lot of things that have to go right. But this has the potential to output a bunch of damage. On its own, it's adding 4 power to board, and it makes flyers. So Raise Dead is okay. I think I would play it. Opaline Unicorn, if you need mana fixing, this is your guy to do it. Kill Shot is great. Omen Speaker is fantastic. Omen Speaker saw standard play. Like, it is actually a pretty good card, and I'd be very happy to pick him up. Overrun is an extremely powerful limited card if you've never played against Overrun. It can win a game out of nowhere, so be wary of that. If you're in like really, really heavy green, Overrun is there. Driver of the Dead, Shambling Goblin, nothing super exciting. Goblin Balloon Brigade needed reprinting. Not very good card. A Crow and Hoplite is pretty strong if you're in those colors, and it does complement the melee strategy pretty well. Here's the white basic land cycling card, Gleam of Resistance, which is an okay card, but you're mostly going to use it for the land cycling. Bronze Friggin' Sable. Of all the 2-1s like you could ever print, like Bronze Sable from Theros, which already has 15,000 other reprints in this set, had to be the one, right? I don't know. Mausoleum Turnkey is pretty good. It's kind of like a regrowth effect, but your opponent gets to choose the card you get. Merfolk Looter, time and time again, has been great. Explosive Vegetation's okay if you have expensive cards. Raise the Alarm's good for melee. Lets you send 2 creatures at 2 other opponents, meaning your melee creature is going to get the +3/+3. Hollowhenge Spirit. White has a lot of flashy creatures. Not a lot, but it does have a good bit of flashy creatures like this one. And it's just okay, like combat tricky kind of creature. Divination's fine. Into the Void is pretty good. I will plug in real quick. Success. Into the Void's pretty good tempo card, but probably worse against 3 opponents. Stromkirk Patrol, not very good. I would avoid that one. So many reprints. Sorry, this is taking a while. Wall Mage, Voyage, and Satyr. Kami is the type of like, I don't know, awkward card where everybody's drawing extra cards. You might not want to play it. Altar's Reap, Kiln Fiend goes good with like Mnemonic Wall and stuff, I guess. Oracle. Fleshbag Marauder is really good in multiples. Edict effects normally aren't great, but against 3 other players, this is going to clear out 3 creatures in exchange for you clearing out one of your own. Coordinated Assault, great combat trick. Dismiss, all the best parts of Cryptic Command. Shimmer and Grotto if you need mana fixin'. Dread Statuary. Okay card. Evolving Wilds is great. I'm the type of person who likes to splash a lot. So first off, I'm curious what art Evolving Wilds gets, because I really hate the tree art, but I love all the other arts. Second off, Evolving Wilds is just fantastic. And then Ghostly Possessions. Okay. So these next 9 cards are actually all new cards. They were all officially spoiled, so these are actual legitimate spoilers. And then I'll be done after that. So I'm going to go through these quickly because this video is pretty long. If you got up to this point, thanks for watching, by the way. Split in Slime, really cool design. 3 double green, so 5 mana 3/3 at rare for an ooze. Monstrosity for 4 double green, so notice how this scales from turn 5 into turn 6. Monstrosity gives it 3 counters, and when it becomes monstrous, you get a token of Spit and Slime. And it notes there that or you get a copy token of Spit and Slime, and it notes that the token does not have any counters and is not monstrous, so each consecutive one that you monstrous gives you another one that you can then monstrous and get an additional 3/3, so you can build up an army pretty fast with this creature. I think it's pretty well designed, and I think it's actually really good. I would be happy to first pick it. Sentinels of the Palace, i.e. Palace Sentinels, is 3 and a white for a 2/4. Enter the battlefield, become the Monarch. So Monarch ability. Should have keyworded it. Would have looked really nice on here. This card's fine. 4 toughness for 4 is probably not that bad in this format. And, you know, it's going to draw you that card on your end step. At minimum, potentially draw extra cards. It's also in white-black, and that's the color that benefits the most from being the Monarch. So this is fine for a common. It's not, like, super exciting, but I think it's a fine, perfectly playable card. Incendiary Descent, this is part of that colored conspiracy cycle. I think we're still missing the white one from this cycle, so that hasn't been spoiled yet. But it's a common with Hidden Agenda. The creatures you control with the chosen name have fire breathing, so you can pay any number of red mana to give it +1/+0 for each red mana. This is fine. Very good with flyers, I think. If you're playing like red-white or red-blue or something like that, and you have a mass of flyers with the same name, this can be pretty decent. But otherwise, not super crazy, and I would just play it in my red deck to give some random creature fire breathing whenever I play it. Selvala. I love Selvala from Conspiracy, by the way. The green-white one. 1 and double green for a 2/3 mythic elf scout legendary creature, Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. So 2 effects here. First one, whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power, not the ones they control. So this is a symmetrical effect. Anytime any player has a creature enter the battlefield, it's going to check to see if that creature's power is the greatest on the entire field, and if it is, they draw a card. Whoever had that creature enter their side of the battlefield. So you'll draw a card if your creature is the biggest, but so will your opponents if they play even bigger creatures. So rewarding the person who is playing the biggest creatures. Second ability is not for everybody, it's just yours. So green, tap, add X mana in any combination of colors to your mana pool, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So keep in mind, Selvala is already 2 power, so you're going to net at least 1 mana off of this using Selvala. And assuming you have creatures entering that have progressively higher and higher power, this can make tons of mana off a single guy. You do have to use 1 mana, so whatever your greatest power is, X is your greatest power. X minus 1 is the amount of mana you're getting because you're using a green to activate this ability. And then you should be able to just jam out creature after creature from that point. This is really, really strong. The second ability. The first one makes me a little nervous because it's rewarding people for going big, which is something they're probably going to do anyway. But there are decks that'll sit around and be like, man, I wish I was playing big creatures. Green decks will have the best go at taking advantage of Selvala. Also, potentially a good commander player, or actual commander, and should probably see play in Mael, I think. Mael will want an effect like that, I believe. Stunt double, 3 and a blue for a flash clone, and that's it. Just enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature, or you may have it enter as a flash 0/0 and it dies. But anyway, it's, fine. Clone is almost always a playable card in Limited because it copies the best creature on the board or the most convenient creature on the board. And that guarantees that you're at parity with the best creature on board. You also have either the best creature or tied for the best creature at any given point. Just given that effect, Flash makes it that much better. So I think this is a solid first pickable card. Maybe unexciting. Clone effects are a little wonky in that, like, sometimes they're not great. Sometimes you copy something worse than a 4-mana creature, but even then, like, you still probably have the best thing on board. Color of the Untamed, 3 and a green for a 2/4 rare elf shaman. Before you shuffle your deck to start the game, you may reveal this card from your deck and exile a creature card you drafted that isn't in your deck. Okay, so similar to the Savant, similar to the Elemental Chimera that we've already seen. This is a card that wants you to show everybody you have it at the beginning of the game and then get rid of a creature essentially from your sideboard, which will be tied to this effect. So for X, you tap it. X is the converted mana cost of the creature that you exiled at the beginning of the game. And if you pay that card's converted mana cost and tap Color of the Untamed, you get a token of that creature. And you can do this anytime you can tap this creature. So essentially lets you cast that creature anytime that Color of the Untamed is untapped. So that's actually pretty strong depending on what you exile. Obviously, this is a way to use an off-color creature. So if you're in like green-blue and you open up like a really powerful red rare in the third pack, you can still play it via Color of the Untamed's ability, since it doesn't require colored mana to activate the ability. So pretty nice. If this is a full cycle, we have a blue card, a red card, and a green card. If this is a full cycle, then we still have yet to see the white or black version of this effect. So I'm pretty excited. I hope that it is a full cycle instead of just the teamer colored cards that we've already seen. 3 more to go, guys. 3 more. And then whatever we get next week. Hymn of the Wilds. This is the other mythic conspiracy in the set, and it's much, much worse. So first creature spell you cast each turn costs 1 less to cast. Wow, that's really good. I can cast my first creature every turn for cheap. Oh, and then I can't cast instants or sorceries. Remember that if you put a conspiracy into play at the beginning of the game, there's no interacting with it. It's there for the entire game. There's no getting rid of it. There's no second game after sideboard. So if you play this effect, you better be damn sure like you want this effect. So obviously, if you put this into play, you don't put instants or sorceries into your deck. You just play creatures and enchantments and artifacts, and that's it. Or those planeswalkers, because you drafted both of them, remember? But that is detrimental. Having instants of sorceries is almost an essential part of every deck, and unless you have just 23 straight up fantastic creatures and almost no filler, I don't see why I'd want to push having only creatures and not afford myself the ability to play like combat tricks or removal spells and stuff like that. So I don't know. This strikes me as a little bit weird. It's such like that is a huge downside for like what equates to almost a marginal upside. If it were a 1v1 game, I would be much more excited, but I mean, you can only jam against one player so much. Birds of Paradise is back, and it's still great, and I will still first pick it every single time I see it, or pick it above pretty much any other card in the set, because I love birds, and I love mana fixers in limited, or mana ramp. One mana ramp, that they don't print that in standard anymore for a reason. And finally, the last spoiler that I will mention in this very long video, Regal Behemoth. 4 double green for a 5/5 rare lizard creature with trample. Enter the battlefield, become the monarch, because why not? And whenever you tap a land for mana while you're the monarch, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. That is very good, by the way, sir and ma'am. Essentially doubling your mana output for being the monarch. This makes you the monarch. If you can maintain it until your next turn, you probably have upwards like 12, 13 mana, so do something crazy with it. I don't know. That's pretty strong, and it's a 5/5 trampler, so it's on a decent body already. I would happily first pick this card, I think. It's not like... I don't know. There aren't a lot of like creatures that you're going to draft that are just like, 8, 9 mana cards. This isn't like an Eldrazi set or anything like that. So having double mana is like, an embarrassment of riches sometimes. Like, what are you going to do with 12, 13 mana? Well, you already played this on turn 6, so hopefully you have a bunch of draw spells and a bunch of other like crazy creatures, and then you can really like take advantage of it. But on its own, this is a fine card. It's going to mean you probably don't have mana problems for the rest of the game, and it's an okay first pick. I'd be pretty happy with it. Anyway, thank you guys for slogging through Theros 2, and I hope you're super excited about everything. I'm just going to make sure I didn't... Yeah, I'm pretty sure I covered all these other cards in another video. Remember that we still have about 10 spoilers or something like that, so expect one last video covering whatever's left, unless Wizards decides to just like kind of actually spoil some of these cards. But when the full spoiler comes out, I'll go ahead and address the cards I missed. And anything here that may have been incorrect or wrongly spoiled, I'll go ahead and address that when the rest of the spoilers come out. But at any rate, set looks great. There are a lot of Theros reprints, but take what I can get. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for putting up with this obnoxiously long video. Thanks for watching me sit on my couch and like just do this with my hands every 5 seconds. And thanks for watching. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to watch this. My name is Timothy. I will see you guys